Well, Steelers fans, you asked for him, and now he's here. Asante Samuel Jr. is a Pittsburgh Steeler. Today, we're going to be talking all throughout this live edition of Steelers Talk what this means for the Pittsburgh Steelers, what it means for their defense, what position they're going to be playing Asante Samuel Jr., how he fits inside the Steelers defense. It's all coming up here, guys. We're going to be taking your questions as well, so don't be afraid to get those super chats in, all that great stuff. We'll stay live as long as you guys have questions surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers, but we do have a lot to talk about today. First, we'll get into our breaking news segment here, talking about the Asante Samuel Jr. signing. But then we also have other segments because, of course, today is our normal live day, Ponzi, and we already had 2 segments ready to go, so we're going to do those as well. We're going to talk a little bit about quarterbacks for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well today. Some 2026 replacements for Aaron Rodgers if this is his only season here in the Steel City, and then we'll take stock of where the top quarterback prospects for the 2026 NFL Draft are at this point in the college football season, and what you guys need to know as fans of the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of that position. Now, Ponzi, he is here. It is Asante Samuel Jr. We've been hearing it for weeks. This fan base wanted to replace Darius Slay with Asante Samuel Jr., and it seems like that is exactly what is happening here.
I mean, it's crazy because, we originally were going to go live today already. And, he was visiting tomorrow. We already were expecting him to visit tomorrow.
Apparently he skipped his visit today with Chicago, and he came to Pittsburgh early. He worked out today, so he's signing his deal today.
So, he wanted to come to Pittsburgh. Of course, the Pittsburgh team doctor did his surgery. I believe that's correct, right?
Yes.
And, great fit for the Steelers.
Yeah, his dad is a big fan of Mike Tomlin as well, Asante Samuel Sr., big Mike Tomlin guy, big Pittsburgh Steeler guy. So I'm sure that he was in Asante's ear saying, you want to go play for Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. So I think, the fact that Mike Tomlin is the head coach, like him or hate him, players love playing for him. And players, he certainly has some sort of cachet when it comes to getting players here to Pittsburgh. Because let's face it, it's East Coast. It's cold in Pittsburgh. Let's face it, the facilities for the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't, state of the art like some of these other teams that they could choose. The reason why players like Asante Samuel Jr. decide to come to Pittsburgh is because they want to win and they want to play for Mike Tomlin. That's just the truth of the matter.
That's why Aaron Rodgers came here.
That's why Aaron Rodgers came here. It's likely, I'm guessing we're going to hear from Asante at some point this week. Now, I'm not sure if he's going to play this week, okay, because we have seen the Steelers bring in guys on the practice squad and, ramp them up and give them time. We'll see if that's the case with Asante. All 3 of their starting, corners from last week are still available this week. You got Joey Porter Jr., James Pierre, and Brandon Echols. I'm sure the Steelers feel somewhat comfortable riding with those 3 going into this game against the Bengals, but I would assume at least by the Chicago game here in a couple weeks, Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be a full go. And the way that I would describe Asante Samuel Jr., guys, is he's actually very similar to Dante Jackson. Okay, he's kind of an undersized. They're actually the same exact height and weight. They're both extremely aggressive corners that aren't the best in coverage, but they've got really good ball skills. They got great zone instincts, and they can read the eyes of the quarterback very well, and they get interceptions. They make big plays happen, and that has certainly been the case with Asante Samuel Jr. throughout his career. In a corresponding move, the Pittsburgh Steelers have released Derek Forrest from their practice squad to make room for the signing of Asante Samuel Jr. So Derek Forrest's time here with the Pittsburgh Steelers is officially over.
Very short time.
You're gonna have to probably delete that list 6 with the.
Yeah, I'm gonna change it. Don't worry about it.
To a list 5?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can do that. All right, so, we're going to get into this, guys. If you got super chats, feel free to super chat your questions, all that great stuff. But we do want to get into this breaking news cut so we can get this out on the channel as soon as possible. So if you guys want to get your questions on the show, we'll make sure to hit those at the end of this breaking news cut. But we got over 600 people watching live. They want to know what the Pittsburgh Steelers are getting in Asante Samuel Jr. So we're going to hit that here in just a second. But make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. Can we get to 100 likes before we get to this breaking news edition of Steelers Talk. I would greatly appreciate your guys' support. We got almost 650 people watching live. Asante Samuel Jr. is a Pittsburgh Steeler. The Steelers are signing him to their practice squad here today, and my guess, guys, is that he is being signed to be an outside corner. Now, he's got kind of the size profile to theoretically play in the slot, but he's not the best tackler in the world. I don't think the Steelers would love that, especially with some of the tackling issues they've had in their defense this year. They trust Brandon Echols to play in the slot. They certainly play Jalen Ramsey to play in the slot, even though it looks like Ramsey might be staying at safety. But if I'd have to guess right now, this does mean that Darius Slay has been benched as the at least for the time being, as the number 2 outside corner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I would assume Asante Samuel Jr. will assume that number 2 outside cornerback position and essentially take the role in this defense that Dante Jackson played last year, that Levi Wallace played in this defense for many years as the number 2 corner. I don't think you want Asante Samuel Jr. as your number 1 corner per se. I don't think he's good enough in coverage to go up against number 1 caliber guys one-on-one, but he's certainly good enough to be your number 2, just like Dante Jackson, for the most part, was good enough to be your number 2 cornerback. So looking forward to talking about Asante Samuel Jr. here, guys. We got a lot of Steelers coverage to get to you guys here on this breaking news edition of Steelers Talk Live. So whenever Ponzi's ready to go here, we're going to dive right in to our breaking news segment. We're going to talk about the Asante Samuel Jr. news. We'll talk about what it means for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward and whether or not he's going to play this week versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Without further ado, man, let's get into it right now. Asante Samuel Jr. is a Pittsburgh Steeler, so let's talk about it. Well, Steelers fans, you asked for him, and now he's here. Asante Samuel Jr. is officially signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers practice squad. And this is a really big-time addition for the Pittsburgh Steelers midway through the 2025 NFL season. Asante had a lot of very interested suitors. He went on a very extensive search to find the right fit and the right team, and the fact that Asante Samuel Jr. picked the Pittsburgh Steelers over other teams that are playing very well right now shows that Asante Samuel Jr. feels like this year's Steelers team can do some good things, and hopefully he can be a big part of getting this defense back on track in the tail end of the 2025 Steelers season. Now, this is why you subscribe to the channel, guys. We're going to get you guys breaking news coverage whenever the Pittsburgh Steelers make a big move, whether it's a free agency signing, whether it's a trade in the offseason or before the trade deadline, whatever the case may be. We get you guys the latest Steelers updates for free every single day on this channel. There's a reason why we have over 100,000 subscribers here on Steelers Talk. So if you guys want your daily dose of Steelers news and rumors, click that subscribe button. And let's get into it, man. Asante Samuel Jr. officially a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's only 26 years old, 180 pounds, 5'10", the exact same height and weight, by the way, as Dante Jackson, the number 2 outside corner for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. And he was the 47th overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft by the Chargers. He's known as kind of like an off-zone kind of corner. Very good instincts, very good in zone coverage. He can play inside and out, even though he's played a vast majority of his snaps on the outside. He's only had 40 career slot snaps in the National Football League. He was pretty much exclusively an outside corner playing in LA's off-coverage kind of style defense in his time in LA. So certainly I feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers probably feel like he's going to fill that kind of role for the Pittsburgh Steelers here as an outside corner. Now you guys can take a look here at what he's done throughout his career. He's been known as a ball hawk. Now last year, he obviously didn't play all that much, so he didn't get so the stats weren't like fantastic, just played in 4 games, didn't have an interception, but he had 2 interceptions in the 3 seasons previous to that. He makes plays on the football. He's got excellent ball skills. He gets interceptions. He's got a really good eye for zone instincts. He's not the best man-to-man corner, but hopefully this is a sign here that the Pittsburgh Steelers are looking to play more zone coverage and play more quarters, play more cover 6, because that's really the bread and butter of Asante Samuel Jr. as an outside corner. Now, let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section at the top of today's show. What is your one-word reaction to this signing of Asante Samuel Jr. I'll let you guys know my thoughts on ASJ and what he brings to the Steelers defense in just a second here, but this will be the pinned comment on today's show. Just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today, and while I talk to you about Prize Picks, let me know your one-word reaction to the Asante Samuel Jr. signing. With that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks, and the hard-hitting football action is even better this season with Prize Picks. The weather might be changing outside, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users and sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. You guys can take a look here at my Prize Picks lineup for Thursday Night Football coming up this week. On professional football, I'm taking the more on Breece Hall touchdowns. I'm taking the more on Drake May pass completions. I'm taking the more on Travion Henderson rushing yards on first rush. So you guys can download the Prize Picks app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on the free Prize Picks app today. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. So for me, guys, I think that this is a big-time get for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just not very often that you add a player of this caliber, a legitimately good number 2 starting outside corner at this point in the year. And frankly, with the miss that they have had in free agency with Darius Slay this year, I mean, this is a godsend because this is the type of player that this defense desperately needs because Slay has really struggled all throughout the 2025 season for this defense. Now, my scouting report on Asante Samuel Jr. is that, he's not a perfect player, but what he does at a really high level. He's got great playmaking and especially zone instincts, those intermediate zones, all that different stuff, cover 3, cover 4, the different styles of zone that you see around the National Football League. He does a really good job playing all of those. He's not the best man coverage corner. He's not the best cover corner in the world, and he can be very aggressive. He's been known as somebody that you can bait into, giving up big plays on double moves and stuff like that. He's also not the biggest guy in the world. He's only 5'10", 180 pounds, so not the biggest guy in the world either. And he run defense is not a strength of his, which is probably one of the reasons why he probably won't be playing in the slot. But he's got excellent ball skills. He's known as a ball hawk. He's somebody that, especially if you play a lot of zone, he can be a very good number 2 corner if you got a good number 1 corner on the other side of him. And I think the Steelers do have that in Joey Porter Jr. Even with his imperfections, he's certainly somebody that's capable of taking away number 1 wide receivers in this league, in my opinion. And I think that this also, another positive to bringing in Asante Samuel Jr. is that he could be a long-term play for this defense. All right, I know you're probably just signing him to a 1-year deal here, but, if he works out, you could bring him back, and he's only 26 years old, and if you bring him back next offseason, he's only 27. So he's somebody that could certainly be a very strong veteran presence for this defense alongside Joey Porter Jr., and he's so complimentary to JPJ, in my opinion, because Joey is that long, lanky type of true man corner, and then, they like to rotate coverage away from him at times, and if you're going to be asking Asante Samuel Jr. to play those, zones and to be a ball hawk and take advantage of interception opportunities, kind of like Dante Jackson did for this defense last year, I think that's the perfect role for him. Because I don't think he's a true number 1 corner. I don't think he's at that level of player, but I think he's a very good number 2 corner, just like Dante Jackson has been and was for the Steelers defense last year. And, I know Dante wasn't perfect. He had his lapses in coverage last year for sure, and you're going to see that from Asante Samuel Jr. He's not a perfect coverage player, but like Dante, they're both very good in zone. They're both very aggressive. They both have good ball skills. I mean, people forget that D-Jack had over 5 interceptions with the Steelers last year. He really did a great job identifying the football and making big plays happen. He was a big part of the Steelers' turnover culture, and we've seen a lot of dropped interceptions from the Steelers' defense this year. Asante Samuel Jr.'s got really good hands, so if he gets opportunities to pick the ball off, he's going to take those opportunities and run with them. But I think it's a really good fit with the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they need out of a number 2 cover corner. And, Darius Slay wasn't up to snuff so far this season. And now that he's got a concussion, it's just great that you're adding a guy this good to be your number 2 corner moving forward. Now, I do have 2 questions when it comes to this signing. My first question is, who is going to play slot corner moving forward? Now, my best guess is that it's going to be Brandon Echols, okay? And, we'll see if Asante's able to play this week. But I think, with Asante, and, he's not the best run defender in the world, and he's had some tackling issues in the past. My guess is they will play him on the outside alongside Joey Porter Jr. Now, James Pierre has played pretty well on the outside for the Steelers over the last few weeks. I think he will continue to be that depth piece in case either Joey or Asante gets injured. Darius Slay, we'll see if they cut him or if they just keep him on the team as veteran depth. I guess we'll see what they do at that position. But then you got Brandon Echols, who I do think becomes your new starting slot corner. I don't love that because he did have some lapses in coverage last week, especially against Ladd McConkey, but he's generally played well enough this year where you feel okay with Brandon Echols playing the slot. And then if you really need to, you can put Jalen Ramsey in at corner as well. It sounds like Ramsey's going to stay at safety, especially with this move to go get another corner. I definitely think Ramsey's going to be finding a home long-term in this Pittsburgh Steelers defense at safety. But if push comes to shove and you need more cornerback depth, Ramsey is more than capable of coming down, playing the slot, or even playing on the outside if absolutely needed. But then the second question that I have when it comes to this Asante Samuel Jr. signing is, can they get him ramped up for this week? They got Kyle Duggar ramped up in time for the game a couple weeks ago against the Colts. So it's certainly possible. We know this coaching staff is capable of getting a player ramped up in the secondary to be able to play within a very short time frame. I mean, it's literally on the same day. They traded for Kyle Duggar on a Tuesday. They're signing Asante Samuel Jr. to the practice squad here on a Tuesday as well. So it's certainly possible that they can get him up to speed. I guess we'll see if he can get ramped up. But if they do, he'll probably be the starting outside number 2 corner this week. If not, I would expect James Pierre to get the start on the outside alongside Joey Porter Jr. with Echols playing in the slot. So sound off for me down there in the comments section. Grade the signing of Asante Samuel Jr. for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Give me an A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. I think at this point in the year, I got to give it an A. I mean, you just don't find players that are like legitimately good starting players coming in. Obviously, he's coming off a very, serious spinal injury that he had to get surgery from. But this is a good football player that's only 26 years old and kind of fits the role perfectly for what the Steelers are looking for in this defense at this point in the season. So for me, I'm going to go with an A. And now I do have some final items here before we say goodbye today, guys. The Steelers did make some more roster moves. Yesterday, they released safety Juan Thornhill. They also released Derek Forrest from the practice squad today, by the way, to make room for Asante Samuel Jr. And then they also poached fan favorite UDFA this year out of Iowa, Sebastian Castro. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers poached Castro off the Steelers practice squad early on in the season, and now the Steelers have poached Sebastian Castro off of Tampa Bay's practice squad, so he will be returning and he will be added immediately to the active roster, okay? So it's great to see Sebastian back, and for me, guys, this is a double dose of good news. Juan Thornhill, to put it in Mike Tomlin's words today, he wasn't up to snuff, but Sebastian Castro had a really good preseason. He looked good in camp. He looked good in the preseason games, and I've always liked his tape, man. He's not the most physically imposing player. He's not the best tackler in the world, but he's got great zone instincts as a safety. He can play in the slot. He can take on blocks as a DB in the run game, which is really impressive. And, he just plays with great instincts, man. This guy is a football player and a good backup safety. So I'm glad he's back in the fold here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So now we get to the current safety room for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, you got Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar. Those guys seem to be cemented as your starters, at least for now. Jabril Peppers is currently working his way back from a quad injury. You got Chuck Clark, who played a little bit this past week. He's still on the team. For whatever reason. Then you got Sebastian Castro being brought in here as another depth piece on the active roster. Now make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already, if you approve of today's moves, bringing in Sebastian Castro and Asante Samuel Jr. and letting go of Derek Forrest and Juan Thornhill. Now today, Mike Tomlin took the podium for Tomlin Tuesday, and usually I have a whole list of takeaways, all that stuff, but today just want to give you guys the essential information, namely the injury information. Sounds like Isaac Seumalo is going to be back this week at left guard. He's dealing with a pectoral injury that kept him out of last week's game against the Chargers. It looks like 73 will be back in the lineup this week, which is terrific news. And it looks like it's going to be all hands on deck once again up front for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then guys that are going to start the week limited for the Steelers on the injury front. Darius Slay dealing with a concussion. I would assume he doesn't play this week, but you never know. Then you got Jabril Peppers, who's working his way back from a quad, and Cole Holcomb is finally going to be back this week, getting back to practice after suffering an illness that has kept him out of the last 2 games. So hopefully these guys can get better as soon as possible. And if you guys didn't check out our earlier video today where I preview this week's matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, we're getting the Icy Hot Bowl, the second one here. We got Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco going up against each other at Acrisure Stadium on Sunday. Can the Steelers get their revenge and split the season series, or will they lose yet another game to the Bengals and get swept by Flacco, Chase, and the Pussycats? I got my full preview up on the channel right now. I'll put the chip to that one in the top right of today's show. And I want to thank you guys for stopping by here today for this breaking news edition of Steelers Talk. Asante Samuel Jr. is a Pittsburgh Steeler, and that is something to celebrate here, guys. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already for extensive Steelers news coverage all around the clock throughout the 2025 season. All right, first segment in the books. Coley was on that highlight cut, I'm guessing? Perfect. Okay. So that video will be up on the channel as soon as we can get it up there, guys. But we're going to continue on with our live show here, guys. And if you have questions, we'll hit some super chats now. But coming up, we got some quarterback talk, all right? 2026 replacements for Aaron Rodgers. Going to go over the options that could be potentially got via trade, via free agency, a little bit of the draft, and then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive in the quarterbacks in this year's NFL draft, which guys the Steelers and their fans should be keeping an eye on here as we get towards the end of the college football regular season. Excuse me. Let's get to some super chats here. Shannon Cassidy with a 5 says he saved the best visit for last. Can't wait to see what the future holds for ASJ. Him and JPJ might be the best, be the duo we needed. Both juniors, LOL.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, man. Both sons of NFL legends as well.
Yeah.
So some great NFL pedigree between these two players. And what I like about the dynamic between these two corners, Ponzi, is that, first of all, they're both young. So they could this could be the tandem here in Pittsburgh for a little while. Especially, they're obviously going to have to bring back Asante Samuel in free agency next year if they want to bring him back. But they're both relatively young, and they could potentially be the cornerback duo for the next 2-3 years here in Pittsburgh. There's no reason why that couldn't be the case. And I just like how complementary their skill sets are. Because you got Joey Porter Jr., who's kind of the physical, long-armed, kind of press man style guy. And then you've got Dante Jackson. Or never mind, Asante Samuel Jr. They're pretty much the same player to me, guys. Only I would say Dante's a bit faster than Samuel is, but they're both 5'10", 180 pounds, literally the same exact size, and they play the game very similarly. They're both known as very aggressive, ball-hawking type of corners that can get baited at times from double moves. They're not the stickiest in coverage, but, they're big-time playmakers. And in this defense where Joey Porter Jr. is going to get lined up on the outside with the opposing team's number one receiver more often than not, that, having a guy that's not the best cover guy in the world and Asante Samuel Jr. is perfectly fine by me. I want somebody in there that can read the eyes of the quarterback, anticipate route concepts, poach certain interception opportunities, and then have good enough hands to capitalize on interception opportunities. Yeah, we've had how many dropped interceptions this year? At least 6 or 7. Jesus, 6, 7. But yeah, man, I think that Asante is exactly the type of player that can help out this defense, and the fact that he's only 26 years old is phenomenal. $5 from Brandon Nicholson says, does this confirm Ramsey is staying at safety? Yeah, it pretty much does, and Tomlin said today at his press conference pretty much, they've found some quote-unquote stability at safety with Ramsey and Duggar, and yeah, it doesn't sound like they want to move off of that. We still don't know if Jabril Peppers is even ready to come back, and Lord knows they're not going to want to put Chuck Clark back out there at starting safety. So it certainly seems like Ramsey at this point in time is staying at safety. And if they move him off of safety, let's say Jabril Peppers comes back and they want to play him at safety, something that I could see is them moving Ramsey back to nickel. That's something that I could see happening. But, I think that they've found their outside starting cornerback duo here with Asante Samuel Jr. and Joey Porter Jr., at least for the rest of this season for sure. And Dollar with a 2 says, why haven't we released trash-ass Clark yet? I mean, he's a bad. I mean, I think it's because that they trust him to at least somewhat know the defense and be a pro and be a veteran and somebody that obviously has played, at least has some experience playing with this defense. Honestly, if I had a choice between Chuck Clark or Juan Thornhill to get rid of, I would have tossed Clark's ass out on the street. But all I care about right now is that Clark's a backup and he's not getting any playing time, which is huge. So if he's on the team, fine, as long as he's not getting on the field, I'm cool with it at this point, especially with how good Jalen Ramsey and Kyle Duggar have looked at the safety position. Got over 800 people watching live right now. Thank you guys for watching our live coverage of Steelers Talk here. If you guys have questions, feel free to super chat. All right, well, we're happy to answer any of your Steelers questions today. We'll be happy to answer any and all questions that you have about Asante Samuel Jr., about the Steelers defense, about the quarterback situation, about the state of the team after a 5-4 start to the season, about this week's matchup against Cincinnati. I'd be happy to answer any and all of your questions surrounding the black and gold here today, guys, and we'll stay live as long as the questions keep coming in. All right, so Dan Flaherty with a 5 here says, JS, I think that's directed to me, if we move on from Tomlin, what potential replacements could you see taking the head coach role? Well, there's a lot of different guys that, could be available. I think that 2 guys that come right to mind. Number 1 is the guy that I've been advocating for recently, which is Brian Flores. Brian Flores, I think, would be an excellent head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not only does he come from, the tradition of Steelers head coaches being defensive head coach guys, but, he already has the respect of a lot of the leadership in the locker room because he was here when TJ Watt was still here and Cam Hayward was still here. And a lot of these guys know who Flo is and they know what he's about, and he would have instant credibility in the locker room. Also, he's a brilliant defensive mind. I think we all acknowledge that. A lot of people still say they wish that he would have been kept on as the defensive coordinator over Terrell Austin. And another thing that I really like about him, Ponzi, is that if you're going to go get a defensive head coach, you want somebody that has connections to a really good offensive coordinator. And he has connections to the Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay coaching tree. And, what if he brought over Josh McCown as the offensive coordinator or whoever the next hot shot guy to come out of Minnesota is here to Pittsburgh, okay? I think that would be an excellent setup where you have an awesome OC that can help develop your new franchise quarterback. You've got Brian Flores, who's a great team leader, elevated, frankly, a lot of those Miami Dolphins teams. I mean, allegedly, Stephen Ross straight up asked him to tank, and Chris Greer, the GM, was building the team to tank and actually lose games so that they could get a quarterback. And Brian Flores said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and win. And then pretty much with a practice squad roster, got them to 8 wins. It was incredible, and a top 10 defense. So he's been one of the better defensive minds for a long time. I also think that he's grown as a person, Ponzi, because I know that people are going to point to how he treated Tua, a young quarterback, and how that did not work out. But I think what he's learned from players, coaches like Mike Tomlin and Kevin O'Connell is that you don't have to be a tyrant to be a successful NFL head coach, because all Flores knew before he went to Miami was Belichickian style, complete tyrannical style, head coaching, pretty much Bill Parcells. And, the modern NFL and the modern NFL player doesn't want to be bullied. They don't want to be tyrannized. They're making a lot of money. Okay. So you have to be able to have that, kind of softer touch and, be very supportive and all that stuff for these players. And I think Mike Tomlin and Kevin O'Connell have really taught Brian Flores how to do that. So I think
seeing a lot of Grudens in the chat.
I mean, Gruden would be vibes, ultimate vibes, but frankly, he hasn't been an innovative offensive mind since the 2000s. He was still running a pretty old school offense in Las Vegas before he got fired. Obviously, that would come with a lot of political backlash as well if you end up bringing him in, which, some people will care about that, some people won't. And I don't know, man. I would love it for the vibes. But, I just don't know if he's actually like the best man for the job. You know what I'm saying? And then Mike McCarthy is another name that comes to mind because he's Pittsburgh born and raised. He knows what Pittsburgh Steelers football is supposed to be about. I think he'd be honored to take the job. So that's another guy that just comes to mind. But there's a lot of guys out there. Clint Kubiak, if you want to go get a younger offensive mind would be a great option. There's a lot of great head coaching, opportunities out there for guys that could be brought in. Cliff Kingsbury has shown some really good things in Washington his 2 years there. If you want to go get an air raid style quarterback or Kyler Murray next offseason, you can bring in Cliff, bring in Kyler, and get those two back to. That's a possibility. Like, there's a lot of different things that you could do at the head coaching position for sure. Dan with a 10 says, is there a reason why the offense can't run through Pat and Jonnu like the Patriots did with Gronk and Hernandez with wide receivers like Welker, Branch, Chad Johnson, and Edelman? The reason why they can't do that, Dan, is because Geno Smith stinks. I'm sorry, man. He's just not worth the money that they're paying him, and Pat Freiermuth has been fine this year. He's had some mistakes, but he's such a good zone killer is what Mike Tomlin is the phrase that he uses. He finds those soft spots so well. He's got really solid hands, runs pretty good routes. He's an okay blocker if you put him in the right position to block. But Geno Smith can't block to save his life, can't run routes at all, doesn't have particularly good zone feel, and doesn't have great hands. It's just the only thing Geno Smith can do a little bit is run after the catch, and even that isn't as impressive as it was last year with the Dolphins when he was a Pro Bowler. So, in my opinion, they should be running more 11 personnel when they want multiple receiving threats out there. I think they should base, especially on early downs, in jumbo 12 and 13 personnel like they have all season. But then when they're in when they're in more pass-heavy situations, they're still sticking in 12 coverage and playing Geno Smith and Pat Freiermuth as slot receivers. That's just not going to work, all right? You got to have Pat as your true receiving tight end, but then, you get a combination of three receivers out there. DK Metcalf for sure, probably Calvin Austin III for sure out there, and then somebody, filling in at that number 3 spot, whether that's Roman Wilson, whether that's MVS, whether that's somebody else. If that, whatever works, that is kind of my philosophy on that, Dan. So, for you to have Gronk and Hernandez work, you're going to have somebody block like Gronk and Hernandez did. And frankly, neither Pat or Jonnu blocks the way those guys did. Frankly, Darnell Washington is closer to the blocker Gronk was than either of those two guys. So, I think they're trying to find that right mix, and I think at times it's worked really well, but in other times, like the Charger game, it wasn't working at all. So that's kind of where we're at right now. All right, I see your guys' super chats coming in. We will make sure to get to all of your guys' super chats by the end of today's show, but it's time to get into our next segment on today's program, which is some potential Aaron Rodgers replacements on the quarterback market if the Steelers have to go find another veteran quarterback in 2026. So without further ado, let's get into it right now. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, we're going to be going over Pittsburgh's options at the quarterback position if they're going to have to replace Aaron Rodgers in 2026, whether Rodgers retires or whether Rodgers falls off a cliff here in the second half of the 2025 season. In either one of those scenarios, the Steelers are going to be looking for a new quarterback next year. So today we're going to be breaking down some of the options that could be available in the 2026 offseason and which guys would potentially fit and who probably wouldn't fit. We've got a lot of options to talk about on today's show, guys. So kick us off down there in the comment section by letting us know. What is the % chance that Aaron Rodgers is the Steelers starting quarterback next year? Put it on a scale of 0, meaning no chance he comes back next year. He's absolutely done after this season, to 100%, meaning he is definitely coming back for another season. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Now, before I start with the potential replacements for Aaron Rodgers, I do want to make abundantly clear that I am still very open to Aaron Rodgers returning in 2026. Just because we're talking about potential replacements today doesn't mean that if Aaron Rodgers plays really well down the stretch and, he wants to come back for another season, that I would say no to that. If he plays, if he plays the way that he has played for a majority of this season, not the way he played against the Chargers, but if he continues to play some good football down the stretch, this team makes the playoffs, and he finishes this season strong, I'm absolutely open to him returning as this team's starting quarterback in 2026. But with that said, I think we do have to acknowledge that it's still very possible that Pittsburgh will be looking for a new starting quarterback next year, whether that's Aaron Rodgers retiring at the end of the year, which he has alluded to a number of times, or whether that's he just plays poorly down the stretch and, maybe old age is catching up to him and he's just not a good player anymore. In those two cases, the Steelers will be looking for a new quarterback, so I think it's worth the discussion to see who could potentially be out there during the 2026 offseason. Now, the big question at the end of the 2025 campaign that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to kind of answer, and this is going to affect a lot of things. This is going to affect Mike Tomlin's future with the team. This will affect who they get at quarterback. This will affect whether or not they consider trading T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, and a lot of the older veterans on this team. Are the Steelers going to try and continue to try and win Super Bowls in the present heading into 2026, or will they embrace a rebuild and take a step backwards as an organization to draft younger players and kind of embrace a new day of Pittsburgh Steeler football? And that's going to be an interesting question to see what the answer to that question is going to end up being. I think a lot of things are going to go into that decision, where the Steelers finish in terms of their record and how successful they are in the postseason, if they even make the postseason. And, I think that if they want to win now, and I think if that's the answer to that question, which is honestly pretty likely, Cam Hayward only has 1 year left on his contract, and he's likely to retire after the 2026 campaign. My guess is the Pittsburgh Steelers, at least for one more season, will in fact try to win now. And if that's the case, and Aaron Rodgers is not going to be that answer, they're going to need another veteran starting quarterback. All right, so we got some options to discuss here. First one is a very familiar name that we talked about this offseason, and that's Matthew Stafford. Okay, and I think, what was crazy was I remember doing polls on this channel saying, would you rather have Matthew Stafford or Justin Fields as the starting quarterback of the Steelers? And like 65% of Steelers fans said Justin Fields, which is nuts to me. But Stafford is one of those guys that has been on a year-to-year kind of situation with his current team with the Los Angeles Rams. And the Rams seriously considered letting him go this offseason. Apparently they were very close to trading him to the Las Vegas Raiders. Just because, they've been kind of in a year-to-year situation with his contract, and he continuously wants to get paid like top 10, top 5 caliber quarterback money. And, it certainly seems like next offseason, especially if Stafford doesn't play quite as well down the stretch, it could be a possibility that they don't give him another 1-year extension next offseason, and they could look to trade him to a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers that could potentially be looking for one last ride for Cam Hayward. And listen, man, Stafford would be kind of that next evolution of the veteran quarterback option here in Pittsburgh, right? You start with Russell Wilson, then you upgrade to Aaron Rodgers, and I think we'll all, kind of say Rodgers has been better than Russ so far this season. And I think Stafford would be an even higher step up from where Rodgers is this year. Stafford still arguably playing at a top 5 quarterback level, even though he himself is getting older. So if you can land him, this would be kind of the next iteration and in the next step up in the Pittsburgh Steelers search for that veteran quarterback to get this team potentially into Super Bowl contention. So certainly Matthew Stafford, if he's available and you're not bringing back Rodgers, I would be highly interested in bringing in Stafford. But then Daniel Jones is still slated to be a free agent next offseason. Now, I highly doubt he gets to free agency, okay? The Colts just traded 2 first-round picks in exchange for Sauce Gardner. So I would say I would fully expect the Indianapolis Colts at some point to come to some sort of agreement with Daniel Jones to be their next franchise quarterback and to give him a 2-3 year extension, especially over the course of those 2 first-round picks that the Colts won't have an opportunity really to draft a future rookie quarterback with, right? So I think that Daniel Jones will be in Indianapolis for probably this year as well as at least the next 2 years, barring some unforeseen disaster from him. But, technically he is slated to be a free agent at the time of me recording this video, so we at least have to talk about him. But certainly he's probably a game manager type of quarterback that the Steelers would probably consider paying if he ends up hitting the open market. But then going back to the trade market here, Kyler Murray has been a popular name among some Steelers fans as a potential option, dealing with injuries this year. Some people are kind of theorizing that he's getting soft benched by Jacoby Brissett there in Arizona this season because the Cardinals want to keep him healthy enough to be able to trade him next offseason. I certainly think that's a possibility. Kyler has not been super productive over the last several years under the Jonathan Gannon regime, but former MVP candidate, he's still pretty darn young, and he does have a lot of talent. So if the Steelers are looking for somebody, to kind of bring on as a reclamation project as a former high-end starter in this league that still has a lot of talent, I don't know how, his little body would hold up in the AFC North necessarily, but it certainly would be an interesting one there if the Pittsburgh Steelers can pull something off for Kyler Murray. Another guy that they could consider is Geno Smith. Now, Geno has just fallen off a cliff this year in Las Vegas, but, the Geno stands out there would say, well, that's because the Raiders are terrible. They haven't had Brock Bowers for most of the season. The defense is terrible, so they're constantly having to throw the football in the second half. The run game hasn't been great. The pass protection's been bad. The weapons aren't good. And Geno Smith, being a very aggressive quarterback, has been, putting the ball in harm's way pretty much out of desperation. Now, I think that Geno has certainly regressed from where he was in his Seattle days. There were some years there in Seattle where he was pretty darn good and maybe in a better situation like in Pittsburgh. Maybe he could, find another life in the National Football League as a starter. He'd probably come cheap in a trade for somebody that's a big body with a big arm, lots of big plays on his film over the last several years. It's at least a name to consider. And then Tua Tagovailoa is another name that could be out there in the trade market. But personally, guys, I'm not the biggest fan of the Tua Tagovailoa idea, especially when it comes to an AFC North team, because I just don't know if he can play in cold weather. And, once the schedule turns to November, it gets pretty cold in this division, man. It gets pretty cold in Pittsburgh. So I just don't have any trust whatsoever in Tua Tagovailoa to play in the cold. He's had opportunities to play in cold weather games throughout his career, and he's had some of the worst games of his career in those kinds of conditions. He doesn't have a strong arm, so when it's windy outside, he's not going to be able to cut through it. And he's really a player that is very dependent on the scheme itself. All right, if you don't have an elite scheme with elite players around him, he's not going to be somebody that's very effective for you. So for me, even though Tua Tagovailoa, very productive player throughout his time, especially during the Mike McDaniel era there in Miami, I just don't think it's a fit here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what's the best way forward? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. What should the Pittsburgh Steelers do next year? Should they try and continue to win now, type W for win now, or do you think they should embrace a full-scale rebuild and take a step backwards so that they can take 2 steps forward in the near future? Type R for rebuild or W for win now. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So in just a second here, I'm going to let you guys know about a great piece of Steelers apparel that you guys can get in your closet today. But while I tell you about that opportunity, make sure you answer today's pinned question down there in the comments. And if you guys want the limited edition Steelers Salute to Service hoodie, officially licensed by the National Football League, you guys can use our link, chatsports.com/PitSalute25. to get it in your closet today, especially if there's somebody in your life that loves the Steelers that you're looking for a great Christmas present for. This is a great item to go get here because I really like the army green color this year, guys. Usually they really go heavy camo, and I just don't know how versatile camo is, year-round necessarily in a bunch of different situations, but I think this army green can be worn in any situation. Also, you got that awesome American flag patch there on the right sleeve. You got the Steelers patch on the chest. It's just very minimal looking, which I really appreciate, guys. So if you like the style of this hoodie, you want to get it today, go chatsports.com/PitSalute25 to get it in your closet today. All right, so now let's talk about some quote-unquote rehab quarterback options for the Steelers, because there's certainly been some quarterbacks over the last several years that were kind of left for dead, people kind of labeled as busts, and then they turned out to be really good starting quarterbacks when you put them in the right situation. Just a couple off the top of the head there. Sam Darnold, obviously with the Minnesota Vikings and now with the Seattle Seahawks. Sam's arguably a top 10 quarterback in the league right now. He's playing almost at an MVP level. He was playing unbelievable football. Daniel Jones was left for dead in New York. Then he goes to a better situation in Indy, and all of a sudden he looks like, a legitimate franchise quarterback. And there's a lot of different examples out there, especially recently. Baker Mayfield, left for dead, all right, was considered a backup level quarterback. And now he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league playing for Tampa Bay. So there's a lot of these guys out there, former first-round picks and, high draft picks that just haven't worked out, that in the right situation could really work out with a new team. And, I think that the top guys in this category, Trevor Lawrence, hasn't had the best season to this point, and if things really hit the skids in Jacksonville, he's got a very tradable contract, and if Liam Cohen wants to go get quote-unquote his guy in the draft next year, and you want to get a pretty high draft pick for Trevor Lawrence, Lawrence certainly has the body and the arm strength to be able to play in the AFC North. That would be one that I'm highly interested in if he's available. Mac Jones, probably less so. He's playing good ball with San Francisco, but he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world. He plays well in Shanahan-style offenses, so maybe that would be a fit with Arthur Smith. But personally, he's not my favorite option. Justin Fields, we know Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith like Justin Fields, but he's had a number of opportunities in this league, man. He's just never made it work. Bryce Young, another guy that's kind of smaller, not the biggest arm. Not sure if he's a great fit for AFC North football, but he's a former number 1 overall pick, and Carolina could be looking to move off of him this offseason. Then Tyler Shuck. I mean, if the Saints have like the number 1 or number 2 pick and they can take Ty Simpson or Fernando Mendoza or one of these guys, Tyler Shuck is a guy that I know Arthur Smith was high on in this year's NFL draft. He played very well last week. If he continues to play well down the stretch, it's certainly possible that the Steelers could be in on him as well, even though I would say that one is probably less likely. But another option that the Steelers could do next offseason is that they could bring in a bridge quarterback and then bring in a younger quarterback to learn from that bridge QB. This is something that most NFL teams do when they plan to draft a quarterback. Some of the bridge options out there, one of them is currently on the team. Mason Rudolph still has another year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He signed a 2-year contract. So honestly, that might be my preferred option just because, he's already on the team. And we've seen Rudolph, do some good things with this team as the starting quarterback. So as a mentor to a younger player, I would have no problem with Rudolph playing that role. But Jacoby Brissett is playing some good football for the most part in Arizona this year. He doesn't turn the ball over, has a big arm. He's a system quarterback that if you scheme things up for him, he can hit open windows. Joe Flacco is another guy that, he would complete the cycle for the AFC North. He'd play for every single AFC North team. We know Mike Tomlin has a lot of respect for him. If he comes back for another season, he could be a bridge option for this team. Tyrod Taylor, another guy that protects the football, big play kind of guy, can run around a little bit, getting older though. And then Jimmy Garoppolo, somebody that's played in Shanahan-style offenses quite a bit in his career, could certainly be a bridge option for somebody next year. But when it comes to the young quarterback options that you can pair with that bridge guy, you could look at 3 different options, in my opinion. You could stick with Will Howard, who you drafted last year and the team really likes, or you could go with a rehab quarterback, somebody that's been cast aside, somebody that can learn from a veteran but maybe can be your future, or you could draft a quarterback in the early rounds of the NFL draft. And, we'll start with the first option there with Will Howard. And as much as I like Will, I just don't know if Pittsburgh should necessarily bank on a 6th-round pick being their franchise quarterback of the future. I know a lot of people like Will, especially because guys like John Gruden have hyped him up saying he's like the next Josh Allen and all this stuff. But, he's not going to be Josh Allen, guys. He just doesn't have the dynamic playmaking ability. He's not as good of a rusher as Josh Allen is. All those different things. And, I think the reality of the situation when we're looking at the AFC conference is that if we want this Pittsburgh Steelers team to be perennially in the Super Bowl hunt, all right, you're going to have to get one of these superstar level quarterbacks, especially once they get to that second contract, because the one-way ticket to purgatory is you draft a quarterback that's good but isn't great, and you pay that good quarterback elite level money, and then you don't have any money to surround that good quarterback with the surrounding cast that they need in order to compete for Super Bowls. But teams like Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, all right, these teams with legitimate superstar quarterbacks that are continuously in the hunt for Super Bowls, those are the guys with the elite quarterbacks. And the Steelers have to do their very best to try and get one of those types of guys as their next franchise quarterback if they want to get on that level, which I think we all want for this team. And when I look at Will Howard, even though he was a 6th-round pick, I do think he has starter potential. Okay, I think that he has the potential to be someone like of the ilk of a Derek Carr. Now, I think he'd be more athletic than Derek Carr is, but both have strong arms, both have good deep balls, but neither of them are necessarily special in the mental processing department or the accuracy department, to be quite honest with you. And if Derek Carr, there's nothing wrong with Derek Carr. Derek Carr was a fine starting quarterback in this league for a long time, but he never won a playoff game playing inside the AFC for the Raiders for many years and never won one with New Orleans either for a reason. It's because he's a limited quarterback, and that's what I think the upside for Will Howard is. So I'm just not sure if I want to bank on that upside, especially in this conference with so many superstar QB talents to compete with. But some of the other rehab quarterback options that you could consider, I'm honestly not the biggest fan of bringing any of these guys in because they're such long shots at this point. But, these are guys with some level of talent, whether they're 1st-round picks, 2nd-round picks. A lot of them have good arm talent. They can move. They've still got some level of physical talent left in them. So if you wanted to bring them in, you could think about it. But honestly, guys, I think if you're bringing in a younger quarterback, I would want to draft a quarterback in the early rounds of the NFL draft and draft your guy of the future that this coaching staff falls in love with as their guy. And there's a lot of interesting options that are going to probably come out in next year's NFL draft, all right? The top 3 definitely right now are Ty Simpson, Fernando Mendoza, and Dante Moore. You're probably going to have to trade up for one of those guys if you want them because they're probably going to be going in the top 8 of the draft this year. Lenora Sellers is a very intriguing option. Will he go back to school? Will he come out? And could he be available for the Steelers to go get? Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati is a name you guys should be watching out for. Darian Mensah, another guy you should be watching out for out of Duke. Jordan Mayava's had a very productive season with USC this year. John Mateer, not sure if he's going to come out either, but he's very intriguing as a developmental type of quarterback prospect. Sam Levitt probably doesn't come out this year after getting injured this season. He'll probably go back to school as a redshirt sophomore. But he's a very intriguing physical talent if he does come out. And Carson Beck, not my favorite option there, but a lot of people like the mental processing on him. So just some names to keep your eye on there. But my preferred strategy, guys, at the quarterback position next year is that I want to have it set up so that this team has an established number 1 veteran quarterback that's not going anywhere. Okay, they're going to be your starter next year, but then you draft a young quarterback that can develop behind that quarterback, whether that's trading for Matthew Stafford and then drafting a quarterback, whether that's bringing back Aaron Rodgers and drafting a quarterback, whatever the case is with that situation. I would rather have an established veteran QB1 that's a little bit on the older side, on a 1-year deal, and then you have that young quarterback to learn from that veteran quarterback for an entire season, and then that quarterback takes the reins as the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers at the start of the 2027 campaign. That's my preferred strategy, but now it's your turn. What say you guys? What is your ideal QB1 and QB2 duo here in Pittsburgh for next year? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. For me, I would probably say Matthew Stafford and Ty Simpson. That would be my ideal setup. How likely that setup is, probably not very, but that would probably be my ideal setup that is at least somewhat realistic for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for talking some quarterbacks here with me today. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already for more extensive Steelers coverage all throughout the 2025 season. All right. Second segment in the books now, Ponzi, and we got one more to go, and it is Stock Watch for the 2026 QB draft class. I've got 6 quarterbacks that I think I would be considering taking with my round 1 pick if I were the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point in time. Some very intriguing names out there, and there's 2 guys, Ponzi, that I don't think a lot of people are talking about that I think they should be talking about, all right? Obviously, everyone knows about the top 3, but there's 2 guys that are pretty darn good that I don't think anybody's talking about, or at least not many people are talking about, that I think come draft night, we're going to be talking about these guys quite a bit. They're very good players. All right, so let's get to some Super Chats. Jonathan Perry says Peppers and Duggar at safety, Ramsey at the slot. Probably, I mean, it's a possibility, Jonathan. When Peppers comes back, that could be the plan. And, I would be supportive of that plan because you've got Ramsey, who's an awesome, tackler, run defender in the slot, close to the line of scrimmage, still playing in the middle of the field, still being able to read the quarterback's eyes, do all those things, be an impact player in the slot, and all those things. And I would prefer Ramsey in the slot over Eccles. I would. So if you're asking me, would I rather have Peppers at safety or Eccles at slot corner? I think my answer is I'd rather have Peppers at free safety, and I'd put Ramsey in the slot. That's probably the way that I would do it. But honestly, I think the way the Steelers are going to do it is they're just going to have Brandon Eccles in the slot, and they're probably just going to have Peppers be that special teams player that he's been all season long.
Rotate in, maybe.
And maybe rotate in. Maybe on early downs, that's what they do to get the bigger nickel kind of package, whatever. But, I would certainly be supportive of that plan, Jonathan. I think it would be a pretty good one. $2 from The Only Key says, is this going to be MVS's debut? I mean, I'll use the same phrase Mike Tomlin did today. We'll see. We're just going to have to see how he progresses in practice this week. Now, especially because Calvin Austin III played his worst game of the season last week, and it's not even close. I think
two drops.
He had 2 drops. One of them led to an interception. Very uncharacteristic game from Calvin, in my opinion, where he looked just straight up bad on film. And I look at MVS as somebody that has experience with Rodgers. He still has his speed with him. It would not shock me if Aaron Rodgers advocates for him to get a helmet and for him to be a part of the game plan this week. So we'll see what happens, but it certainly sounded like Tomlin was very open to the possibility. So if I had to guess right now, I would say he gets a helmet.
I would think so too.
To what extent does his role look like? I'm not 100% sure, but, that's where I'm at right now. $2 from Bernard says, I'm a little worried about Rodgers. He looked old. I don't even know if that's necessarily the case.
I think he overthrew a lot, and he was very frustrated.
Like, if anything, he had too much arm. Here's the difference between Big Ben and Aaron Rodgers. With Ben, it was just so obvious he didn't have the arm strength.
He couldn't throw it deep anymore.
And you could tell as the season went on, he just couldn't throw the ball anymore. And with Aaron, if anything, it's the exact opposite. He's overthrowing guys, right? So I will say Rodgers doesn't move as fast as he once did, but he still has very quick feet. He's still moving around in the pocket pretty well.
Pocket presence is there. I don't think his body is in terms of mobility. We're not going to see him on the run.
He's not going to be escaping the pocket all that much. But listen, man, I think it was just an off night accuracy-wise for Aaron Rodgers. All right, and we'll see if those accuracy rows continue, but I don't think that they will. I mean, let's just take the 8-game sample size before. Did any of those issues show up in a major way? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I mean, I think that he looked pretty damn good the first 8 games. So, when we have this body of work of 9 games from Aaron Rodgers and only one of them he's looked that bad, I got to look at, the bulk of the work that Rodgers has had, and he's been pretty solid. Has he been MVP caliber? No. All right, he hasn't. But has he been
expecting that?
Has he been a pretty good top 15 level starting quarterback in the league? Yeah, he's probably been top 15 so far this season, outside of that one game where he looked just terrible. But I still have hope that he's going to regress back to the mean. Or progress maybe back to the mean.
Yes.
Just because, bad games happen. I mean, Josh Allen put up, 13, 14 points against Miami's shitty defense last week. And, I don't think anyone's talking about how Josh Allen is washed, right? So I'm not saying that Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, but you didn't bring him in to be an MVP. All right, it's kind of similar to Russell Wilson last year. Russell Wilson gets all the blame for looking like, a mid-quarterback last year. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, well, this wasn't the deal. The deal was Russell Wilson is going to come in. He's going to have a really good run game. He's going to have multiple good weapons to throw to, and he's going to have an elite defense. Down the stretch, he didn't have any of those things. George Pickens gets hurt. There goes your receiver core. All right, Mike Williams doesn't do jack shit for the entire season after you trade a 5th-round pick for him at the deadline. Right then on defense, complete collapse down the stretch. Russell Wilson was not built to carry an NFL team to a championship, but he got blamed for it for some reason. And it's just a an imbalance between expectations and, what a guy's actual role is. And what did the Steelers bring Rodgers in to do? They brought him in to be a game manager, just like they brought in Russell Wilson to be a game manager last year. I think Rodgers has been a much better game manager this year than Russell Wilson was last year. And if this defense can turn it around, which they still can, they still have some of the best talent up front.
They looked really good on Sunday.
They looked pretty darn good on Sunday, and they looked really freaking good against the Colts. All right, and now you're adding Asante Samuel Jr. to that mix. If this defense can play top 10 to top 5 level football on that side of the ball, this team can beat anybody in the game. Anybody. They've beaten the Patriots and the Colts, two of some of the best teams in the AFC, fair and square. All right, so I'm not throwing in the towel on Aaron Rodgers, Bernard, all right? I'm not going to ride that roller coaster, so to speak. Now, if he puts together 2 or 3 really bad performances in a row,
we'll start to think about it.
Then we can have that conversation, all right? But, outlier performances happen in the National Football League. They just do. Russell Wilson led the Steelers offense to 42 points in a game last year. All right, that was his outlier performance, and it was really good. Sometimes the outlier performances are really bad. All right, and unfortunately that was the case for Rodgers last week, and hopefully he can, play like his normal self heading into this week and in future weeks. And by the way, if there's any defense in the league where you can have a get-right game, it's against Cincinnati's
Exactly.
defense. So,
Thursday Night Football.
I think
torched.
I think the Steelers score over 30 points this week. I do, and I think I think the discussion around Aaron Rodgers and this Steelers offense is going to be completely different a week from today than it is right now. $5 from the Only Key says, do you think Jacoby Myers would be okay if Aaron yelled at him? I think Jacoby Myers' problem with the Steelers is, A, you have state income tax in the state of Pennsylvania. You don't in Florida. The weather is much worse in Pittsburgh than it is in Jacksonville. And in my opinion, if Jacoby Myers wanted to actually win football games, he would have came to the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he didn't mind a little bit of cold, if he didn't mind not having the fanciest facilities in the world, all that stuff, I think he would have picked the Pittsburgh Steelers. But he picked the Jacksonville Jaguars because he wanted the nicer weather, because he wanted the offensive head coach versus the defensive head coach, because of all this different shit.
I just think that he would get more targets in Jacksonville. It kind of shows now.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point, Ponzi. He's going to get more targets in Jacksonville's offense, which is more pass heavy. In the Steelers offense, they play a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. Like, you think Jacoby Myers is going to be happy coming off the field when they want to play 13? No way, man. So, plus the fact that it's cold, plus the fact that all this different stuff, I think Jacoby Myers, the number one thing on his list was not winning football games. And I think if it was, he would have chose Pittsburgh over Jacksonville.
He's in a contract year. He's going to be thinking about these things.
Yeah, exactly. And also, the Raiders' old wide receiver coach is the wide receiver coach in Jacksonville. Yeah. And apparently he was really good friends with them. So I can't say it shocked me that he went to Jacksonville because of the, state income tax and getting more targets and the better weather and the wide receiver coach. I'm just saying that if his number one thing on his list was winning football games, he would have came to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And I do, to the second point of Key's question here of Aaron Rodgers yelling at him, these guys are professionals, guys. Like, Aaron Rodgers is a respected quarterback. People view his opinion greatly, and getting yelled at is just a common theme in sports. If you played sports, you're going to get yelled at. That's just how it is. And Aaron Rodgers is basically a quarterback who's also a coach. So he knows these things. He knows what he wants out of his receivers. Yelling at Calvin Austin when he drops the ball, you can't do that. What, you want him to be, hey, it's okay, guys, we'll get it next time. No.
Yeah, you want him to be Russell Wilson, where he says, you're good, King, after he drops a wide open pass? No. When Calvin Austin III drops a pass leading to an interception, I want my quarterback to say, how the fuck do you not catch that? Like Aaron Rodgers did on that play. Instead of, you know what Russell Wilson would have done? He would have went right over to Calvin Austin III, patted him on the head, and said, you're good, King. You're good. And it's like, no, you're not good. All right? And I also love the double standard when it comes to Aaron Rodgers and yelling versus Tom Brady. Tom Brady would fucking ream his guys on the sideline, and people would say, look how focused he is. Look how competitive he is. Look how much fire Tom Brady plays with.
Rodgers does it,
but then when Aaron Rodgers does it, it's, look how bad of a teammate he is. oh, he's toxic and all this stuff. It's like people see what they want to see. People see what they want to see. And with Aaron Rodgers, unfortunately, a lot of people want to see the bad stuff. So when they see him yelling at players instead of, oh man, look how fiery he is, look how accountable he is, look how competitive, and look how he's keeping his guys accountable he is. It's no, he's an asshole. And it's like, all right, well, that's what you want to see, man. We all see what we want to see. $2 from Big Ben says C.J. Stroud an option if he continues to struggle. I don't think so. I think Houston would give him at least one more year.
If they would trade him, it would be not next year or this year. It would be next year offseason. So like 2027 offseason.
Yeah, because they're probably gonna pick up his fifth-year option, and
I think he's been like the whole thing with the Texans is that they're having a whole bunch of issues, but I don't think C.J. Stroud has been the main reason for that.
I mean, but he's been a part of it.
He has been a bit part of it.
Like, dude, his inaccuracy sometimes is so bad. Like, he'll have clean pockets and just miss a wide open receiver. That's not on the O-line. That's not on the coordinator. That's on C.J. Stroud missing throws. And that doesn't just happen once or twice a game. Sometimes that happens 9 to 10 times a game. So that has to be something that gets addressed with C.J. Stroud. I think he's got a lot of talent and a lot of potential. We saw that in his rookie season when he was more comfortable. But these last 2 years, man, inaccuracy has been a big problem with C.J. Stroud.
Yeah, and I don't think that the Texans would move off of him.
I don't think so either. I think they give him one more year just because they've seen the potential. And you just don't move off of young quarterbacks with star potential like he has.
Unless you're the Jets. With like Sam Darnold.
Darnold had the standard 3 years there. He had the standard 3 years.
Well,
you get 3 years in this. You get 3 years in this league to determine if someone's the guy or not. A lot of times, people want to just give people 1 year.
Yeah.
And they gave Sam 3 years. It didn't work out because they had terrible coaching, and then he went to a different place with better coaching, and he worked out. I just think that's the way it works sometimes. $2 from Victor. Appreciate you, Victor. We got another one here from Shannon Cassidy. Says, Asante Samuel Jr. chose Pittsburgh over San Fran. Priorities matter. I mean, Listen, man, if you want to come win football games, listen, man, I know that the Steelers just have lost 3 of their last 4 and all that different stuff, but this team has a lot of talent on it. It really does. And I'll say this right now. If Mike Tomlin wasn't the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I highly doubt Asante Samuel Jr.
I think his dad was in his ear a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I think his dad was in his ear saying, man, Mike Tomlin, one of the best in the biz, this defense could really use a number 2 corner. You can fit right in and be the missing piece to that defense. And I think he agreed. And, he could have gone to San Fran. He could have gone – some of the other teams, kind of colder way. Could have gone to Charlotte, which is,
he canceled against Chicago.
Yeah, he canceled the Chicago visit. He could have gone to Minnesota and played in a dome. He could have gone to all those different places. He decided to come to Pittsburgh. All right, and that means something. That means that he wants to win. That means that he feels like this team is capable of winning, and I tend to agree with him. Obviously, this team needs to play better. I mean, losing 3 of your last 4. All 3 in embarrassing fashion is not great. But, adding a player like Asante Samuel Jr. gets this team closer to their potential, in my opinion. So, all right, man, we got one more segment to get to before we finish up today's live show. Stock watch for the 2026 QB draft. Definitely a lot of interesting prospects. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, my feelings on this year's draft class, which includes 2 potential first-round QB draft targets that nobody is talking about right now. Let's hit it. Today on Steelers Talk, we've got Stock Watch for the 2026 QB class. When it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, as this team continues their search for their next long-term answer at the quarterback position, there's certainly quite a few quarterbacks that could be taken in the first round of the NFL draft in Pittsburgh next year. And today, I'm going to be sharing my updated thoughts on all the top guys in this year's class. Now, make sure you guys stay tuned to the end of today's show for 2 quarterbacks that I think could by the end of this process, be first-round picks that nobody, or at least not many people, are talking about right now. Now, before we get into the video today, predict it for me down there in the comments section. Will the Pittsburgh Steelers draft a quarterback in round 1 of the 2026 NFL Draft? Simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comments section. For me, I think they absolutely will. All right, so now let's start with the guys at the top of the class, because it really feels like we have our big three. We have the three guys that are pretty much for sure going to go in the top 10 of the NFL Draft. That is, if they all come out. And that is Indiana's Fernando Mendoza, that is Oregon's Dante Moore, and that is Alabama's Ty Simpson. I think that these three guys have consistently played very good football all throughout the 2025 college football season. And I would say the only guy among these three that is for sure coming out is Fernando Mendoza. He's a redshirt junior. Obviously he's got a ton of Heisman hype right now after that awesome, finish versus Penn State last week. He's got serious arm talent, can layer throws over the middle of the field, can throw it down the sideline as a cannon of an arm. He's got a little bit of athleticism as well. Not the best pocket presence, not the most out-of-structure playmaking ability in the world either, but he's got the profile of someone that projects to be like a more athletic version of like Jared Goff, and Goff has been super productive in the right situation there in Detroit. This guy reminds me a lot of his profile, and I certainly think that's worth a top 10 selection. I think Ty Simpson is actually my number 1 quarterback in this class right now. The sheer amount of NFL quality throws over the middle of the field on his film this year in the SEC has been mind-boggling. I mean, he is fearless throwing the ball over the middle of the field with anticipation into tight windows with precision and accuracy. He's already proficient playing under center and playing in the play-action game. That's something the Steelers really want to do with Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. He did a ton of it in Tennessee with Ryan Tannehill. And, Simpson, I think, certainly should come out, but there are some rumors that he could stay at Alabama, because when Ty Simpson, a young Ty Simpson, was growing up, dreaming about, his football dreams, he wasn't dreaming of playing in the National Football League. He was dreaming of playing quarterback for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And he finally, he had to wait for his opportunity. He finally got it this year, and he's still got another year of eligibility. So, some people around him are thinking this has been his lifelong dream. He's not going to just want 1 year of it. He's going to want a full 2 years being the starting quarterback of the Alabama Crimson Tide. So we'll see what happens. I mean, if he's like the bona fide number 1 overall pick, there's going to be a lot of people in his ear saying, you got to go this year. And my guess is he probably will. We'll see how his Heisman campaign goes over the next few weeks. But, he loves the Alabama Crimson Tide, and it's going to take quite a bit for him to not come back for that second year of starting. But then Dante Moore, it looks like that he certainly has a chance to stay as well. He's only a redshirt sophomore. There's been some reporting from Todd McShay and others that Oregon is starting to set up the infrastructure for him to stay in place there in Eugene for another season. I think Dante could come out, and the fact that he is still, pretty darn young, I think is actually a positive to his draft profile, because teams can look at him and say, hey, he still has room to grow. He still has an ability there to maybe sit for a year and learn from a veteran quarterback, because he is coming in so young, and he can develop at the NFL level as opposed to developing at the college level. But, it's certainly something here where people are starting to notice that the more college snaps you take, the better you translate to the NFL. And that might be something on the mind of Dante Moore, who hasn't gotten to some of those thresholds yet. So certainly talented enough, easy thrower of the football, really good out-of-structure playmaker. And he's shown off some flashes of really high-end mental processing as well. Certainly a top 10 pick if he comes out, but he's just a redshirt sophomore, so he could come back to school. But if any of these guys come out, if the Steelers are going to get any of them, they're going to have to, probably trade up inside the top 10. And I think, for as inconsistent as the Steelers are, I think we all expect them to be somewhere around the 8 to 10 win range this year, and that won't get you inside the top 10. You're going to have to trade up to get one of these guys if you want one of them. Now, if they fall in love with Ty Simpson, or if they fall in love with Mendoza, or if they fall in love with Moore, they just got to have them. I could see the Pittsburgh Steelers trading not only this year's first-round pick, maybe even some additional mid-round picks in this year's NFL draft to go get them, but also next year's 2027 first-round draft pick to go get their guy. I certainly think that there is an arms race going on in the National Football League right now with multiple teams with multiple first-round draft picks, so we'll have to see where the Steelers stack up come this offseason. But I certainly think if you're going to get Mendoza, Moore, or Ty Simpson, you're going to have to probably trade up if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comment section. Is it worth trading 2 first-round picks to trade up for a quarterback this year? Type T if you would trade 2 first to go get Simpson, Mendoza, or more, or type S if you would stay put and not trade up for one of these marquee QB prospects. This will be the pinned comment on today's show, so in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. While I tell you about Prize Picks today, let me know T for trade or S for stay put. Now let's have word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And the hard-hitting football action this football season, it's even better with our friends on Prize Picks, which is a free app that you can download on your phone right now. The weather might be changing outside, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on. Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. On Prize Picks, how you play is up to you. If you want flexibility, choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you want the biggest payouts, go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Join millions of users. Sign up for America's #1 fantasy sports app. You guys can take a look here at my Prize Picks projection for Thursday Night Football this week. I'm taking the more on touchdowns for Breece Hall, the more on passing completions for Drake May, and the more on yards on the first rush for Travion Henderson. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, so now I got 3 guys that are not in that, top tier, upper echelon of guys that are going to go in the top 10, but guys that I think the Steelers and you guys should be keeping your eye on here for the rest of the college football season. The first one is Lenoris Sellers, okay? And anybody that's watched Sellers play this year knows that he still has some development to do. And he's just not, mentally processing defenses at the way that he needs to if he wants to be a day one NFL starter. The accuracy has not been there either. There's certainly things that he needs to get better at in order for him to be one of those marquee top 5 caliber pick type of guys heading into the NFL draft next year. And even if he does come out, even with some of the deficiencies he has in his game, Anthony Richardson had a lot of those deficiencies in his game, and he still went in the top 5. So a guy like Sellers, who has a lot of traits you can't teach, incredible playmaking instincts, pocket presence, incredible contact balance as a runner, speed, size, a cannon of an arm. It's a lot of things that in his profile you just can't teach. And, the stuff that you can teach, footwork, so to some degree, accuracy, mental processing. Those are things that, teams would certainly be taking a look at and taking a shot on probably in the first round if he decides to come out. And there's certainly, some talk about him going back to school and playing out his senior year, maybe transferring to a different program that can, continue on his development. But there's certainly a risk to coming back for your senior year as well. Just look at Drew Aller. He probably would have been a first-round pick this year if he would have came out in the NFL draft. He had a pretty good end to his season last year, having some really good performances at the end of the season in the college football playoff, etc. Decides to come back to Penn State to try and win a national championship, and not only does he not look very good and he doesn't develop all that much, but then he gets injured, and now he's being talked about as like maybe a late day 2 but probably a day 3 draft prospect when he would have gotten a first-round selection most likely if he would have came out last spring. So that is certainly something that could happen to Lenoris Sellers. If he gets injured or tears his ACL next year coming back to school, that could take him from a potential round 1 prospect if he comes out this year to somebody that's not getting taken on the first day of the NFL draft in 2027. So if I'm Sellers and if my agent is telling me, hey, man, you're probably only going to go like maybe top 15. You might not go top 5, but you get picked somewhere between like pick 8 and pick 15 if you come out this year. I'm coming out of the draft, all right? If anything, I'm going to a team that is better suited to take on my talents. Maybe they have an established veteran quarterback for me to sit behind. And honestly, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers could be a really good spot for Lenoris Sellers if he decides to come out in the draft this year, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes back next year, because you've got one of the smartest quarterbacks to ever play, one of the best mental processors in the history of the game in Aaron Rodgers to learn from. And, all the guys that have learned from Rodgers over the years, Jordan Love in Green Bay, Zach Wilson in New York, Will Howard currently here with the Pittsburgh Steelers, they all rave about Aaron Rodgers' ability to mentor young quarterback talent. So that could be exactly what Lenoris Sellers needs in his rookie season. You have Rodgers play out the final year of his career as the starting quarterback here in Pittsburgh in 2026, followed by Lenora Sellers taking the reins in 2027. You could honestly say that might be the best setup for a guy like Lenora Sellers at this point in his football journey. But a couple guys that I don't think a lot of people are talking about are Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati. This guy's a lot of fun, man. And, I look at his film, and, I watched it. I'm going through all these quarterbacks right now. I was like, who is this guy out of Cincinnati that's got crazy arm talent? He's got good size, and he can run. All right, this guy's got a bunch of great tools. He can mentally process the defense pretty well, too. It's not perfect, but it's certainly a lot to work with there. And he's put up some really good numbers this year with Cincinnati. He pushes the ball down the field a lot. He only has 2 interceptions on the season. Now, last week, he did not have a particularly great game. I think it was against Utah where, I think he had 11 completions. So listen, man, a little bit up and down for sure. But this guy would be more of a late first round type of guy that you don't have to trade up for, but he has a lot of physical tools to work with. He's got a really smooth, fluid throwing motion and a lot of power to that arm as well. And he's got some nice pocket presence, some playmaking instincts, and he can run with the football. There's a lot to work with there for the guy like Brendan Sorsby. That really intrigues me. And if he, really plays well down the stretch here, I got to consider giving him a first-round grade, when I officially do my grades this spring, because I've been really impressed with this young man. And another guy that brings a lot of good stuff to the table is Duke quarterback Darius Mensah. Now, Mensah could certainly come back to school, and so can Sorsby, by the way. But Mensah is somebody that has a lot of physical talent, easy, smooth throwing motion, some really great arm talent, can run with the football as well. And he has had some really good numbers this year as well, man. He's got the tools that you look for, certainly, and he would be coming out a little bit early. So, his representation would have to be telling him, hey, you're probably going to be a first-round pick, because he's got first-round caliber tools. And frankly, there's not a lot of quarterbacks in college football that have put up the numbers that Darius Mensah has put up this year. 24 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions, almost 70% completion percentage, and almost 2,800 yards passing. And that's not even counting what he does as a rusher, guys. Darius Mensah has done a hell of a job this year. And when you watch his film, man, it looks like, at times, first-round caliber tape. All right, and this is another guy that I kind of came onto late in terms of his film, but when I saw it, man, I'm like, dude, this guy's better than most of the guys that are getting a lot of the first-round hype right now in certain moments. So definitely keep your eye on Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati and Darius Mensah from Duke. They are 2 very interesting prospects that could be within range of where the Steelers are going to be picking in the first round of the NFL draft this year, and you probably wouldn't have to trade up for them. So take your pick down there in the comment section between these guys, kind of as mid to late first round quarterback prospects. Which one would you pick? Type LS for Lenora Sellers, type BS for Brendan Sorsby, or type DM for Darius Mensah? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Honestly, I think I'd be perfectly fine at this point taking any one of these gentlemen in the NFL draft next year. Now, some other interesting names to keep your eye on. Sam Levitt from Arizona State. Love his play style. He's so much fun to watch, but he's so inconsistent at this point in his college career with his accuracy and his mental processing and his decision-making. Plus, he's coming off a major injury, and he still has 2 years left of eligibility. He's going to be coming back to school. But if he does come out of the draft for some reason here this spring, he's got the physical talent that definitely intrigues me. Same thing goes for John Mateer, good rusher of the football, powerful arm, kind of that a little bit funky sidearm release, but he's an absolute gamer, somebody that would be a little bit more of a developmental type of guy, but somebody to keep your eye on for sure if he decides to come out. And then Jaden Mayava from USC, certainly catching my eye with his production this year in Lincoln Riley's USC offense. He has been really good mentally processing defenses. He's been really accurate with the football, not a ton of athleticism and out-of-structure playmaking ability. And he doesn't have a bazooka of an arm or anything like that, but certainly the production catches your eye in terms of Mayava. And then some other potential dart throws. If you don't want to take a quarterback in round 1 or even in round 2 or round 3, you want somebody that has some physical tools, has shown some flashes in college football, but you don't want to spend a high-end draft asset on a quarterback. Cade Klubnik had a really rough start to the year, but he's actually played a little bit better before he got injured. And then Drew Aller, obviously he's got the physical tools and the elastic arm talent, but he's coming off a major injury and he's never had the mental processing chops in college, so you'd have to develop him. Garrett Nussmeier has had a disaster of a season this year, lots of turnovers. He's been playing with some injuries as well, but he kind of reminds me of like Sam Howell's trajectory, where he was supposed to be like the number 2 overall pick in the draft. Remember that one draft class there, and they ends up going in the 5th round. I see a very similar trajectory for Garrett Nussmeier. And then Carson Beck, some people really like him. Some people think that he's a really high-end mental processor, but he just hasn't ever played consistently well and on the big stages of college football, and he's played some really bad games throughout his career. For me, he's nothing more than a day 3 dart throw. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today's show. Thank you for talking some college football with me here today. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let me know down there in the comment section who your guy is in terms of this year's draft class and who you're hoping the Pittsburgh Steelers draft next year's NFL draft in Pittsburgh. All right. We are done with our segments for today, Ponzi, but we will be back live on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, maybe 6 p.m. Eastern Time, depending on when we can get live. But we'll be live on Thursday again to talk about any other news that comes out during the week. If we get any update on if Asante Samuel Jr. is going to play this week or anything like that, we'll make sure to get you guys updates on that. And then we have our Week 11 watch party. We'll be going live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, a half-hour pregame show followed by live play-by-play and analysis of the game itself and post-game coverage. So if you guys want to join us live later in today's program, and we do have a Venmo, by the way.
Yeah, Brian said he sent a Venmo.
All right, well, Brian, we'll get to your Venmo here.
I'll wait for that. Bernard Nixon with another 2. Said, do you think Sunday was the outlier of trends for A-Rod? Yeah, I think so.
I think so. When you look at his other performances, Bernard, and like just on the film, like he hadn't had that many missed throws in any game this season. And frankly, it wasn't close. Like he's had some games where he's had some misses, like maybe 2 or 3. He had like 6 or 7 like bad misses in that game against the Chargers. It was just not good. And I think that he'd be the first one to tell you that he did not play well on Sunday night. And, he was at the press conference. He was like, I played terribly today. So I think when you look at his performances throughout the year, I mean, we've seen, multiple 4-touchdown performances from A-Rod this year. He's still towards the top of the league in touchdown passes this year. Like, I think he's going to be fine, all right? I'll start to worry about Aaron if he really struggles against the Bengals defense this week, and if he struggles again for a 3rd straight week against a bad Chicago Bears defense. All right, now I'm willing to listen to Aaron Rodgers is washed kind of discussions. But the Chargers defense is really fucking good, and we haven't seen these types of mistakes from him throughout the season. So I have no reason to think that this is going to be the Aaron Rodgers that we see the rest of the way. I'm just hoping that last week was the outlier, and this week he progresses back to the mean. $2 from Brian Ruiz, and he says, been seeing the media talk about Tomlin to the Giants. Can we trade him for a first?
Yeah.
Let's get a QB whisperer or offensive guru. I mean, yeah, man. Here's my thing. I think you can get a first-round pick for Mike Tomlin. I do.
I mean, yeah.
It might not be a 2026 first-round pick. It might be a 2027 first-round pick because
I'd be happy with that.
Because if you got to think about the Giants situation, right? They're going to have like a top 5 pick next year, top 10 at the very least.
You're not trading that for
Mike. I don't know if you're trading a top 10 pick guaranteed for Mike Tomlin. But what they might do is they might trade their 2027 draft pick for Mike Tomlin.
Maybe second? Or you think just a first would get it done?
Just a first.
Okay.
And by the way, the Steelers can use, that would mean that they would have 2 first-round picks in 2027 as ammo to go trade up for a quarterback in 2026 if they really feel like they want one, right? So
that Giants pick would be pretty valuable too.
Exactly. And then if you don't have an opportunity to trade it for a quarterback, then you have 2 first-round picks in 2027. So I think that would be something that would work. Now, in order for the Steelers to consider that, the Steelers will need to miss the playoffs. And I think they'll probably have to get less than 10 wins. They probably would need to have Mike Tomlin's first losing season in order to consider it. which isn't impossible. Like, if this offense just can't get it going the rest of the season, they look as bad as they did against the Chargers, they will. They probably will not win 9 games this year. But as we've seen throughout Tomlin's tenure, they just never do that. They always find a way.
Until it's proven wrong, assume they're having a winning season.
Exactly. So, like, I think the vast majority of the chances here, like the I would say at least 85+% chance Tomlin returns next year, because I think they do make the playoffs. I think they probably do still get to 10 wins this season. I do think that they still do that. I think the defense is playing better. I think the offense won't play as bad as it did against the Chargers in most games down the stretch. We'll see what they do against Baltimore. Like, people talk about the Baltimore matchups like we're destined to get swept by them.
I mean,
when was the last time we got swept by Baltimore? All right, like they almost always at least split with Baltimore. Okay, then you've got this week versus Cincinnati. There's no reason why you shouldn't win this game at home. No reason. Okay, I know people are going to say, well, you lost to them on a couple weeks ago, but that was on Thursday night on the road. Your defense wasn't playing as well. This week is completely different from week 7, guys. It just is. So you should be able to win that. So that's 2 wins right there. The Bears have just not played really good football this year. They just haven't. That defense has major issues, and so does that offense. I think Caleb Williams is going to crumble facing this Steelers defense. So that's 3 wins right there. And again, you can't count your chickens before they're hatched, but we can look at the landscape here. Already got 3 wins. I think the Buffalo game is more winnable than people want to give the Steelers credit for. They just got shit pumped by the Miami Dolphins of all teams. All right? So that is a very winnable game. That's 4 potential wins. Okay? Then let's say, they split with Baltimore. Then you got Miami, a team that you should win at home in a potential cold weather game. I know it's on prime time, and the Steelers have sucked on prime time games this year, but I still think the Steelers are going to win that game. So that's 5 right there. Then you get Cleveland again. All right, Shadur Sanders will probably be starting that game. That's potentially 6 more wins right there. Okay, and that's accounting for a loss versus Detroit. That's accounting for a loss against Baltimore. Okay, and that would get you to 11 wins. And if you lose to Buffalo, you still get to 10 wins, right? So as long as the Steelers kind of take care of their business, and I know that is, this is the Steelers. They don't take care of their business, or at least they haven't. If they do it, though, there's a very clear path to 10 wins and potentially even 11 wins still for this team. And 10 and for sure 11 will win you the division. All right? Like 9 wins might win you the division this year. Just because Baltimore, they've got some tough games at the end of their schedule, Ponzi. Like these next few weeks, they've got some easier ones. They got Cleveland. They've got the New York Jets. Then they've got, I believe they have us. Do we have their schedule? I think we have a listicle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was also saying, seeing this, last time the Ravens swept the Steelers was 2019.
Okay. So it's somewhat recently, but
in
like
terms of
recent history, like, dude, the last time
2020s, it's 8-3 so far.
Yeah, dude, like the Steelers. Obviously the Steelers have lost to the Ravens. They've lost their last 2 games to them, playoff game included. But like, Lamar Jackson has not generally played well against the Steelers.
No, it was Derrick Henry.
And last year, the 2 games that the Ravens won, it was Derrick Henry running all over the Steelers. And who knows, that might happen again this year. But here's Baltimore's final stretch. And just for reference, they're sitting at 4-5 right now. I think most people expect them to beat Cleveland and New York. All right? So that's going to be 2 wins right there. But then they get Cincinnati at home on Thanksgiving, and Burrow is likely to return. And whenever Burrow's playing, man, they've got a shot. I would still say that they win. But here's the thing, Ponzi. In division, with Burrow playing in those 2 games, something tells me they're going to split. So you have a loss versus Cincinnati. Then I think we can bank on probably at least 1 loss versus Pittsburgh. So that's 2 losses right there. All right, then you get New England, a really tough team at home. That is a toss-up at best. And then you get Green Bay on the road. Those are going to be 2 tough games. I think they lose at least 1 of those 2 games. So that's 3 losses right now that you can look at the rest of Baltimore's schedule. And right now with them already at 5 losses, right? 4 and 5. If you add just 3 more losses, they're sitting at 9-8. And 10 wins the division for you if you're Pittsburgh.
And ultimately, too, Sperry, I really do believe this. I think potentially the division comes down to that last game.
Yeah, and it absolutely could. It absolutely could. If the Steelers win in Baltimore, though, it might not as much.
No. But I think if the way that I predict it is that they're going to basically be in a virtual tie going into Week 18. If the Steelers lose, a game they shouldn't, or a game that you don't have them winning, like Buffalo.
Well, okay, so let's just go through the exercise, all right? Do we have the one for Pittsburgh, too?
Yes.
Yeah, let's go to the one with Pittsburgh first. If I had to predict the record of the team heading into that final matchup versus Baltimore, I would say they beat Cincinnati. I would say they beat Chicago. I'm going to say they lose to Buffalo, even though I think that it's very possible they win that game. I think who do we say wins the first matchup? Let's just say the Ravens win. Let's just say the Ravens win. All right, let's say the Steelers have a 2-game losing streak there, and they lose those 2 games. I think they should certainly still beat Miami. I think they probably lose to Detroit on the road, and then I think they beat Cleveland Week 17. So that's 4 more wins from what they have right now. So that would put us at 9 wins.
So we'd be
9-7 going into the final game versus Baltimore, with a loss to Baltimore already.
Yep.
And then with Baltimore, I'd say they beat Cleveland. I'll say they beat they'll beat New York. I'll say they beat the Bengals at home. We'll say they beat Pittsburgh. So at that point, they would actually take the division lead. So that's already 4 wins right there. I'm going to say they lose to Cincinnati on the road and just say that that's the split. I'm going to say they lose to New England. And then, that Week 17 game against Green Bay is going to be huge, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because if they lose that game, then they're sitting with 8 wins?
So if you have them winning 5 so far, or 4?
4.
So that puts them at 8 wins.
So that puts them at 8 wins. So if they lose to Green Bay too, they're sitting at just 8-8 going into the final game.
And the Steelers would be 9-7.
Right, and you would be right in that scenario then, because if the Ravens win against the Steelers and they sweep them, then they win the division at 9-8 because they get the tiebreaker for beating us twice.
Yeah.
So you're right, Ponzi. It certainly is setting up where both times where the Steelers play the Ravens, the winner of that game will be probably first place in the AFC North after the conclusion of those 2 games.
Obviously, if the Steelers take care of business, it's a 1-game lead, but it's still a lead.
Still a lead in the division.
If they take care of business with those 2 Ravens matchups, the division could be locked up by then.
Dude, I'm telling you, if the Steelers play the way that they're capable of playing, and I know listen, man, I get it. Oh, Tomlin can't do that. Blah, 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 blah. Just on paper, all right, with the way that we've seen this offense play at times this year and the way this defense has played at times, if they put it all together, there's absolutely no reason why they can't beat Buffalo and they can't beat Baltimore at least once, if not twice this year.
Even then, maybe Detroit.
Yeah, it's always possible, but, I don't think they're going to win every game down the stretch. It's not realistic, right? I think, if the Steelers put it all together in the final stretch here, they could lose 2 more games and they could finish the season with 11 wins. And it's still within reach. And even if you add on a loss to Buffalo there, it could be 10. However you want to slice it. But it's also possible that, depending on the week, the offense or the defense just looks like dog shit like it has the entire season. You lose some of these games that you should win, and you start giving up some of these games, and they end up costing you the season. That's also possible as well. I find it very hard to believe that this team doesn't get to at least 9 wins, especially with this team being coached by Tomlin, but that's kind of where I'm at right now, Ponzi.
I feel like, an understated part, it is kind of looking past an opponent against this weekend to say that it should be a win, but if it becomes a loss, then we have serious questions.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I think we're gonna wrap up for the day here, guys. Thank you so much for stopping by here today. Asante Samuel Jr. is a Pittsburgh Steeler. Football gods have delivered us a starting corner midway through the NFL season, and it didn't cost a draft pick, man. Hallelujah. It's absolutely fantastic stuff, man. We'll have more coverage for you guys tomorrow here on Steelers Talk. So if you don't want to miss any of that, click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Till next time, guys. Here we go, Steelers.